Gene, let's start by playing for everyone what I think was the most important moment, and really the moment that stands out to me as the biggest moment of the day. Take a look.
When you opened the can which contained the carpet sample submitted to you, what was your reaction?
Well, first I jumped back about 2 feet because the odor was pretty strong. But it was, to me, the smell of human decomposition.
Gene Casarez, here we have a guy who has spent his career studying human decomposition, and it's not someone saying, oh, it smells like a dead body. This is a guy who knows what human decomposition smells like, and he says that's exactly what came out of that can that contained the piece of the trunk of Casey Anthony's, the piece of carpet from the trunk of Casey Anthony's car.
You know, Vinnie, it's really something because here in Florida, they took a tin can that was very insular, very sterile, and they captured a carpet sample and air from that trunk. They sealed it, and it was sent to Tennessee. And it was Dr. Vass that opened it as part of his testing, and that is when he smelled that air in Tennessee. And it's very interesting because we constantly talk about George Anthony, Cindy Anthony, the tow truck operator and the salvage yard operator all smelling that smell, but we've forgotten about Dr. Vass as the one that specializes in this in his life.
Keith Murray, this is powerful testimony. If a jury is ever to hear this, and then that's what's going to be decided, whether or not this type of evidence comes in, but if a jury ever hears that this guy recognized the smell of human decomposition and it was strong and he jumped back 2 feet, oh my goodness.
I find his statement that he jumped back 2 feet to be a little hyperbolic. I think that's a little embellishment on his part.
Really?
I do. I think he's playing up a little bit. He's on the camera. He was, you know, his testimony with the state was very, very friendly, very chatty. But now that he's been beaten a bit by the defense, he's starting to back off of that hominess that he's got. But come on, you think he really jumped back 2 feet?
Well, the smell of human decomposition can be pretty strong.
It can.
Keith.
And I've smelled it myself, but it didn't cause me to jump back 2 feet.
Well, this was concentrated in the can, and it sat there, and it simmered, Keith, which, to me, it's a very strong image that he sent. Are you telling me, Keith, you don't think a jury will believe him?
I think from my personal standpoint, I think it's a little hyperbolic, and he's exaggerating a little bit. He's kind of embellishing what he found when he opened it. I think there are more significant things in his testimony from the defense standpoint. Just in listening to him, I have a number of problems with his methodology. This whole set of research is based on only 4 bodies and then an additional 8. So everything he's testifying about today is based on 12 samples over, 10 years almost? That's it. The only published results on this are 2 papers that he authored himself, plus 1 other paper from this Dr. Stratheropoulos. He didn't collect the sample himself. It was collected by somebody else and delivered to him. I think this concentration sample is invalid because it doesn't represent the atmosphere that was in the trunk. It's been enhanced. There were 2 control sunbirds that were taken from junkyards in the area that were also tested for chloroform and tested positive. We haven't heard that yet in his testimony, but it's in the defense motions. He can't explain how the chloroform got there or in what form it was placed there. It could be from chlorinated pool water. It can be from a wet pool towel. He can't say that. There was limited animal testing, and then you come to the issues with the database that he's using, how he's not giving those results to the defense so they can have their own expert review. And then finally you get to this issue with the Labrador device and his financial interest in his testimony in this case being...
Hey, everyone's entitled to make money, right? Jose Baez has a financial interest to win the case, doesn't he?
Sure he does.
So,
sure he does.
That's why I always find that disingenuous when you go after the financial motives for someone to do what they do for a living. My goodness.
But it's fodder for cross-examine.
It is.
It's something to put in front of the jury.
Sure it is. Well, let me do this. Gene Casarez, he mentioned chloroform. Keith Murray did. Let's show the folks at home the testimony about the chloroform, and we're talking about a pretty high amount here. Take a listen.
The actual amount of chloroform that is typically present in human decompositional remains was about 8 times greater than what you see in the control sample of the carpet. In the case of what was detected in the trunk material, that was about 10,000 times greater than what we would expect.
All right, Gene, what's the significance of this chloroform and the amount of chloroform for the prosecution?
Well, it's doublefold because decomposition, when a body is decomposing, chloroform emits from the body. But in the levels that he's talking about and the peaks that he's showing, he's saying that it is 10,000 more than the control sample, which would mean chloroform would have been applied to that body that was decomposing.
All right, Keith, and Keith, you make a good argument here for keeping perhaps some of the science out, the scientific experiments.
I'm shaking my head here because of and all deference to Gene. We don't know what that chloroform is or how it was deposited there. There's no indication that there was a body was chloroformed.
Do you need it though?
No, I'm not saying.
Yes, this has to be put into context. That chloroform could have come from pool water. We know that Casey Anthony brought her daughter to a friend's pool. That chloroform could have gotten there in any one of a number of ways, and you can't quantify it by saying, oh, well, we found chloroform there. It necessarily had to have been in the form that was used to subdue the daughter.
Go ahead, Gene.
Vinnie, I'm reporting what was coming from the witness and coming from Jeff Ashton. I am not making my own conclusions. I didn't test it. So, yes, on cross-examination, it could come from anything, but this is what the witness said during his direct testimony.
Gene, Gene, you'll have to remind me, was there ever any evidence regarding a search for chloroform on any computers?
Oh, yes, there was. And there were computer searches on a family computer. We don't know who made the searches.
Right.
It was in a spare bedroom, but it was how to make chloroform and then general searches for chloroform.
All right. So, you talk about circumstantial evidence and putting pieces together. I think there's some fair arguments that could be made by the prosecution here, Keith, as well. But here's my question to you, Keith. Here's my question to you.
Sure.
Let's say the judge buys your argument and Jose Baez's argument, and this stuff is kept out. You could still have this man come into the court and testify about what he smelled, couldn't you?
You could, and certainly he's got experience with that smell, and then, that's up to the jury to decide whether or not that has the weight that the state wants it to.
Right. And Gene, if he comes in and testifies about the smell, there's some other people who also smelled that in the trunk, right, including the grandparents of Kaylee Anthony.
Right, and the tow truck driver and the operator at the yard where the car was stored. Here's I think one of the biggest arguments the defense has because, Dr. Vass decided early on there's not enough study in the forensic area of decomposing bodies. So he has developed over 400 compounds that are part of his testing, his procedure. They are privately owned. So he has not disclosed to the defense what all those compounds are. So their expert cannot fully do research, they say, to be able to fully cross-examine the witness. Will that be allowed? Because doesn't that undermine a right to a fair trial by Casey Anthony's defense?
And that's another great point that the defense is making. All right, Keith, let me go to you now. And again, say we're at trial, and you've got people talking about, it smells like a duck. Could it be a duck here when we're talking about a decomposing body? To me, that is powerful evidence. And I think anyone who's come across decomposition in their life, like you have, you know it's a unique smell. And that's something that I think would resonate maybe even more so than these scientific tests.
It is unique, and it does stay with you. It's not something that's easily forgotten. But again, you have trash that has been in the back of that car for 18 days. I think the defense is going to try to do the best they can to make the argument that that smell, as close as it is to human remains, and as many people have identified it as such, really came from the garbage that was in the back of the car that was festering for 18 days in the the Florida sun.
Yep, a spirited debate in the courtroom today, and a very spirited debate here in session. Gene Casarez, great job reporting. Keith Murray, a pleasure to have you on the program. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, we're out of time, but of course we'll be back tomorrow with the final day of the Casey Anthony hearings. We're also taking you to Arizona for the James Ray manslaughter trial. Until then, of course, you can keep watching them both online at cnn.com/live. I'm Vinnie Politan for In Session, always your front row seat to justice.